Okay, so let's start with kind of a basic question just to figure out where we all stand on this panel. When it comes to artificial intelligence, are you an optimist or are you pessimist? And I'd kind of just like to go down the line, and why?
Pessimistic, because I generally am in most aspects of my life.
Okay.
So, but I think, I think generally the things that we make, we end up losing control over, whether it's industry or, I mean, already the gadgets that we make seem to control our lives. So, I tend to fall a bit more on the pessimistic side.
Right, gadgets that we can control our lives. What happens when we can't control the gadgets, right?
Yeah.
What about you? What do you think?
I think I'm actually an optimist. I think it's something to do with the inevitability of it that it kind of excites me. It's that question of the unknown that I just think is really interesting. And there's something, it challenges our ideas of, our whole concept of us as a species and, our existence and all of that stuff. But I think there's something about it that's, whilst I agree actually with Ben in the sense that, it's not so much a question of the AI, it's a question of how it's used. And at what point does it get to that point where we are in some, where our lives have become inevitably changed by it. But ultimately, I think, I'm quite optimistic about it.
Alex, I know how you feel.
Go on then.
It's same as him, inevitability, right?
No. Well, no. It may or may not happen. I mean, it's not definite.
Maybe not that way, but it will
maybe
happen.
not anyway. I mean,
DeepMind.
DeepMind is an AI, but it's not self-aware. I mean, that's a sort of human-like AI, and probably a strong AI won't be human-like. But we don't have self-aware machines yet. We just don't. But I'm an emphatic optimist about machines and a pessimist about us, is how I'd put it.
It's totally fair. And what do you think? Yay or nay on the AI?
It will most probably happen, but will we do ourselves over before it happens as human beings? I would like it to be like WALL-E.
That's the dream.
That's it, really.
Okay, fair enough. Can we talk a little bit about the theme or the role that religion kind of plays? Because
just gets in the way, as far as I can tell. Do you mean in the film or in general?
I mean, in the film specifically. I mean,
it's there as a joke. It's there as a joke that Oscar's character at one point sort of compares himself to God.
But it's not a joke.
Well, it is. He's presenting himself as being kind of megalomaniac, and it's suiting his purposes at that point. It is kind of a gag, honestly. I mean, it's got a serious intent behind it, but the act of creation is not really godlike. It's human-like. We have children, and we create things, new consciousnesses, routinely. That's everyone in the room and everyone.
But not new races.
Or new species.
Right.
Yeah, dogs. I mean, look what we did to dogs, like wolves. I mean, they used to be wolves. Look at the weird things we made.
Well, I guess the reason it doesn't feel like a joke.
What the fuck?
A morky poo. I guess the reason it doesn't feel like a joke to me is because, Oscar, maybe you can speak on this. The character of Nathan seems very weighed down by the knowledge that he actually has, the inevitability, if you will, of AI and how that will actually kind of be the extinction of humanity. I think he talks about that a little bit. And that feels like a heavy weight, and I feel like that's kind of the God view.
But that's a human thing. That's what we're doing. That's not God's. Humans are doing that right now. And Oppenheimer did it. That weighed down on him when he talked about I am become death, quoting the Bhagavad Gita. But anyway, sorry.
Yeah, so I mean, it's true, because I think that in the moment when he says the God, he's kind of putting on this God complex. He is manipulating Caleb. He is presenting someone that Ava needs to be saved from. But I think his true feelings are when he sits up there and says, it's inevitable. They're going to look back on us like apes, upright apes with crude tools. So don't feel bad for them. Feel bad for us.
Right.
And I think he also believes he's not special. It's him. It just happens to be him, but it was going to be someone. So in that way, I actually don't think he's an actual megalomaniac. I don't think that he's
It's like his
special.
own barrier.
Yeah, and I think he's quite
megalomania.
quite misanthropic in general, much like Alex Garland
No,
is.
no.
He is. He's impossible to read, this guy. I feel like you're mad all the time. Are you?
What, angry?
Yeah.
No.
He's
I
like,
feel
I'm
quite
good. I'm
calm.
happy right now. Okay, let's talk a little bit about shooting Ava, like filming Ava. And this one goes to my DP here. Obviously, that was like a lot of visual effects were going into that, but you and I actually just spoke a little bit about how you get the audience to feel something for what they already know as a robot. And that's something that our characters go through as well. Caleb goes through that as well. But how did you approach that issue of, you know, the audience already knows this is a robot and it still has to feel something other than they're a machine?
Well, I guess in a sense, like the ultimate challenge there is really a question of proximity and intimacy as well. And I think that's what we were striving for, is that sense that apart from the fact that we know she's a robot, it's like you're talking about human interaction and you're talking about a specific moment between two people, or rather a developing series of moments between two people. And in terms of sort of putting a frame around that, that's something I think is always in the back of my mind anyway, and it certainly was in the back of all of our minds. How do we do it in a way that feels honest and truthful and isn't sort of a slave to, well, the filmmaking process for starters, but also the technological aspects of that. And I think we achieved that, I mean, partly because our VFX team, led by Andrew Whitehouse, were just so brilliant that they sort of allowed us to really just shoot it the way we wanted to shoot it, which meant that, you know, with me, it's always a question of like putting the audience in the room, put that person, that viewer right next to the situation that's happening, so that you can really pick up on, you know, all of the micro expressions that are happening, and you feel, you know, you feel what the characters are feeling, and there are visual ways of doing that, and I think, you know, that was essentially our approach. Basically.
I particularly love the way that some of the VFX in the way it was shot looked incidental.
Yeah.
You know, where you would just catch it, and it would be maybe a little out of focus or a little fuzzy, and that gave it really the sense of reality. You weren't being presented with the visual effects. You know, you were catching glimpses, and I think that's what makes it feel so special.
Well, and then there's also the layer of all the security cameras, right? So there's like lens within a lens within a lens in this movie.
Yeah.
You've got the security cameras, you've got people who know that they're on camera and they maybe don't know they're on camera when it's working based on those power outages. I mean,
But there's also, particularly in like Ava's room, there were a lot of opportunities there to put frames within frames within frames, literally. You know, so you could tell a story, or you could tell particular aspects of that story using the environment, using the reflections, using this sort of dual personalities that would come through. You know, many ways of doing that, and we had, it was like constantly images being presented to us in a way during the process, and it was fantastic.
To me, that felt very like Frankenstein is one of my favorite books, and it felt very like story within a story within a story. That's how that's structured. Is it kind of gets deeper and deeper into the narrative structure. Felt like you guys were like framing it in that way, which Frankenstein has some similarities as well.
There's a good example of that in I think I can't remember which session it was, maybe 3 or 4, where they're finally talking about getting her out of there, and she's sort of, there's a shot where we're kind of in profile, and we've got him in the glass room, and she's on the outside, and she leans forward, almost sort of pleading, as this sort of sense of kind of like vulnerability coming through, and as she leans forward, you see her reflection appear. So effectively, she's kind of like pleading to herself, well, not really pleading to herself, but kind of like, you sense there's a sort of duality in the message there. And I think, I'll be honest, that was, you know, when we were framing that, I was like, oh, fuck, there's a fucking great reflection in this. And it works for the scene.
It means, totally, I see that. In terms of like music, right, when we first, in fact, I'm gonna go out of order and really upset our AV guys. Can we pull up the design of Ava, or meeting Ava? That's the second clip that I asked for. But I want to pay attention to the music in this scene, guys.
Hello.
Hi. I'm Caleb.
Hello, Caleb.
Do you have a name?
Yes. Ava.
I'm pleased to meet you, Ava.
I'm pleased to meet you too.
Just quick audience poll. Despite everything, meeting Ava, could you forget that she was a machine in that simple scene right there? Would it be easy? Because for me, I instantly felt something for her. Anybody else? Or she's just still a machine? Okay, good enough. I felt like the music in that scene particularly was a little bit different. It had this childlike feel to it, right? Like something about Ava being a child. Can you talk a little bit about that? Because I feel like...
Well, that was almost exactly the intention. Or, I mean, it was one of the very first things that challenges that Alex sort of set us in a way. I think, was it the first thing we wrote on the film? I think it probably was.
Wrote for the cut, yeah.
Yeah, and it was, you know, the challenge was this has to be, we have to fall for her in the same way that Donal will, and also it has to have no edge to it at all. It has to just be almost confrontationally beautiful and simple and childlike, as you say. And I mean, it's interesting because both me and Jeff probably have a natural bent towards darkness and melancholy.
No, really? Portishead?
I mean, I think most composers do in a way, and it was to do a sort of fairy tale thing, and even fairy tale music often has a slight hint of darkness. And we did do something, I think, early on that Alex said, yeah, it's great, but it's got a slight hint of darkness, just no edge whatsoever. And that was, and it was almost so simple when we sent it off to Alex. I thought, you know, is this really too simple?
Right.
And it was immediately, you know, the answer came back, no, this works. We're going to ring fence this. This is Ava's theme. And you're right, the childlike innocence thing.
And I thought there was something so cool about that scene as well, because it's paired with the noise that she makes in her own movements, which to me felt very like a cat's purr. So we have like visually a robot, right, or a machine, and then in our mind we have this emotional connection to a child, and then we also have this idea of like the pet, right, and like ownership over the pet, and those three things came together in a really interesting
and also
way.
the thump, the pulse, which is almost like the heartbeat, or Donal's heartbeat, or her heartbeat, or whatever that is. It definitely
So
adds
many
the excitement and the nervousness of meeting her for the first time.
Well, and I think, so another question for my composers is that we go from something like that is so light and, you know, has this really uplifting kind of magic, mystical feeling, and then there are other scenes where the audio is totally cut out for like, and opts for this like cacophonous kind of sirens, you know, so much edge is happening. Like, what are we accomplishing in those scenes specifically when we're taking all the... One is when he wins at the very beginning of the movie. I'm not ruining anything. He wins a contest. That's kind of the shift of his life, right? To go and be a part of this. Like, why did we make those decisions, Alex, as well as composers?
Well, I mean, the harder edged noise scenes are kind of they grow. I think they all pretty much grow from some other space, some other kind of feeling. Except from the hacking scene that starts, I think, kind of quite harsh. But, I mean, suppose, you know, we were kind of lucky with Alex that he wanted to use sound and not sound design, but actual kind of noise music, you know, electronic music to at its most harshness, and actually remove dialogue and you know, everything else. So it was purely on its own, and it brought this, I don't know, kind of, I suppose, an intensity and madness to the scene.
It felt a lot like, I mean, to me it feels like the whole movie is this like kind of tug of war between logic and emotion.
Well, I mean, there's this whole thing of kind of, there's standout points, you know, like, you know, the harsh kind of with blood scene.
Yes, of course.
Not without giving too much away there as well. And
there will be blood.
There will be blood, yeah. And and you know, where the music really stands out, and everything kind of falls away except from those cues. But the rest of it, I think the difficulty was because there's quite actually a lot of music in the film.
Yeah.
And you know, sort of quite a large dialogue. You know, so it's to make. You know, it's like you were saying last night on the panel. It's like multi-layered. So there's so many things going on within the story. You feel something for someone, but something else is actually happening. And so we had to be totally aware of that and work with that, really.
Yeah, what I think the film has in some respects is that it's structurally a bit strange in ways that may not be obvious, but from a sort of writing or film construction point of view, it's a bit odd sometimes. And it has these very long dialogue scenes and then very extended sequence with no dialogue at all. There's several of them. There's 3 in particular. And what happens in the film, I realized at a certain point, is that at different times it will lean incredibly hard on some of the pillars of the people who are making the film. So it will lean really hard on a production designer. It'll lean really hard on actors. I mean, seriously hard on actors. And on DOPs. Everybody there's a sort of equal distribution of intense weight. But the thing about the weight is that it tends to be isolated in a way when it's happening, right? So it's not a bunch of people sharing it at the same time. It's landing very hard on someone at that particular moment. What it does is, so in these scenes where the music has to step right forwards and it's taking the place of dialogue and sound design and all sorts of sort of ancillary things, and it will really just be Rob's images and the music. That's what's going on. And what I like about that is that it removes any timidity. You have to step forward to it. You can't hedge your bets at all. It has to be fantastic or it just fails. And there's something kind of empowering about that. And it sort of, it just forces something. And what Ben was saying about like that very lovely piece of music that they wrote for Ava when she first appears is the darkness to me was like hedging its bets a little bit. Don't say she's amazing, just go for it. And if your bit of music doesn't make her amazing, then it's failed. So it's sort of, there's nowhere to hide. That's the point, there's nowhere to hide.
Well, and it kind of brings us back to the whole Turing test thing too, right? Like you got to go for it. If you hedge your bets early on when you first meet her with that undercurrent of darkness, then I feel like the Turing test itself, right? Because he was supposed to be brought in to see what he could feel for her, not necessarily what he thought of her, right? Caleb?
Yeah, a Turing test, I'll be pedantic about this, I can't help it. A Turing test, it's misleading because we think of it as a test for consciousness. That's how it gets presented in the media, and it's not. The Turing test primarily tests the ability to pass the Turing test. It doesn't imply sentience, it implies the use of language that fools a human, and that may or may not involve a consciousness. But the film is a bunch of tests. I mean, the thing is just a test. It's a test of sort of all sorts of things, prejudice or aesthetics or whatever it happens to be. And actually, really the thing being tested, I mean, I don't know if you're going to be sort of arty about it, it's like the audience or something, but kind of the thing being tested is not him, it's her, or the robot. And it's a simple question, does she have consciousness or not? How do you establish that? You know, how do you establish whether something has consciousness? Because you guys presumably think I have consciousness, but you don't really have much evidence for that. It's basically an act of faith. It's because you have consciousness, or you believe you have consciousness, and you think I am like you, therefore you think I have it. But actually, if you were asked to prove it, demonstrate it,
all you'd have was your language, right?
Yeah, stuff. I mean, we'd have what's available to us in interaction. Right. But it's surprisingly limited. There's a lot of acts of faith, and when you remove the faith by saying, no, this is a machine, now demonstrate it, it's quite hard. For the people who've seen the film, she smiles as she walks out. That's it. That's the proof. There's no one she's trying to fool. She's on her own. It's an internal, it's a representation of an internal mind state. So that's as close as I can get to a proof. People who haven't seen the film, that's the ending blown. But
Bummer. Look for that smile. What he's trying to tell us is that he's actually AI. And he will reveal that at the end of the panel. Can we bring up the clip for the Turing test, actually? I think that's really good and kind of a good place to do it.
Do you know what the Turing test is?
Yeah. I know what the Turing test is. It's when a human interacts with a computer. And if the human doesn't know they're interacting with a computer, the test is passed.
And what does a pass tell us?
That the computer has artificial intelligence. Are you building an AI?
I've already built one. And over the next few days, you're going to be the human component in the Turing test.
Holy shit.
Yeah, that's right, Caleb. You got it. Because if that test is passed, you are dead center of the greatest scientific event in the history of man.
If you've created a conscious machine, it's not the history of man. That's the history of gods.
So what does the future of the Turing test look like, right? Like when we do have AI, like how do we go about actually knowing that we've gotten to self-awareness or gotten to consciousness?
The chances are the Turing test will get passed some time before you have a self-aware machine.
It'll be a different test.
It's effectively a different test. You just have to separate them. The Turing test is a fantastic test. It's a really interesting test, and it's a very, very difficult test to pass. But it doesn't actually imply that you have a self-aware machine. It implies something else. It implies an incredible facility with language that would trick a human into thinking that they're interacting with a human. But there's a conversation in the film about chess computers, right? If you're interacting with a chess computer and you're judging it only on playing chess, which is a bit like judging a consciousness just by language, a chess computer acts as if it wants to win chess. That's how it acts. So it would pass that kind of test about want, but it doesn't want to win a game of chess. It doesn't know it's playing chess. It doesn't know it's a computer, and it doesn't know what chess is. So that's analogous, actually, to the Turing test. You could pass the Turing test without knowing that you had language or that you were a machine that was separate from other machines or other organic things. That is the pedantic thing, yeah.
Okay, sure. So if we're talking about actual AI, the idea of nature and nurture comes into play. Strong AI.
Because we've got AI.
We've got regular AI now.
Yeah, we're
talking about like
phones and video games.
Ava-style AI.
Yeah,
is what I mean.
Yeah.
Okay, like legit AI.
Yeah.
So not to illegitimize everyone out there building artificial intelligence. You're doing a great job. I mean, let's talk a little bit about how nature and nurture plays out, right? Because Ava is programmed, and I'm giving stuff away, but she's programmed to be heterosexual, right? And female.
Nope.
That's what he said. That's
I know,
what
but
Oscar
he's
said.
lying the whole fucking time.
Don't trust him. Don't trust this man.
No. I'm not. Sorry, I'm not getting it. No, that's really fair thing to say on the basis of what he said. The whole point about this film is, in some respect, is that we make a bunch of assumptions about what's going on in this robot's head. We make those assumptions based on what the robot looks like and the way it acts, but it's acting that way to trick us and to trick the actor that isn't here, and actually to trick him too. That is about what we bring to it. Really what these guys do is they get very involved in each other, and they stop thinking at a certain point what's going on inside this machine's head.
But why did she have a perception of herself, like this self-image, right? She wanted to get dressed. That was obviously for him, but when she walked off into the world...
She wants to get out.
So that's just what she needs.
Yeah, exactly. She wants to get out. She's a sentient creature in a glass box that doesn't want to be in the glass box.
Yes, but do you think that she has... So it's her alteration of her own appearance throughout the movie. That's never for her, is what you're saying. It's always for me, or as the viewer, or for Caleb, or for Oscar.
Actually, what I'm saying is something even more tricksy and elliptical than that. It's that we don't really know why she's doing it. She is definitely doing it to seduce him, and she's also doing it to seduce us. And if the film functions, and we keep track with the way Donald Gleason's character Caleb is, then it is happening to us in the same way as it's happening to him. But the point is that we're not really able to understand what's going on inside her head. And for various prejudicial reasons, we're not kind of crediting her in the way that we should be crediting her. And her is just a sort of, it feels inappropriate to say it.
Yeah.
Okay, because she has the external form of a girl in her early 20s, but she's a machine, and she does. You know, I think it would be fair to say she doesn't have a gender. You know.
Yeah. Okay. So if like the, well, I guess you're kind of every question that I have, he's going to say we don't know what's in her mind. So, but you wrote her mind.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the trouble I have. So here's a question for you, Oscar. Is Nathan a good person?
I mean, he has the capacity for good, but I wouldn't be, you know, I wouldn't probably distill it in such a sentimental way, you know, either good or bad. I think that he's both in a way. I think that's how Ava demonstrates true consciousness, that she has both too. She has both the capacity for goodness and also for calculation and, as Alex says, for selective empathy. You know, whether Caleb deserves his fate, you know, that's up for debate. But you know, I don't. Yeah, so just in that same way, I don't think that he's necessarily a good or bad person.
Okay. What about like the role of feminism in the movie? I know we talked a little bit about like maybe she doesn't have a gender, but Nathan as the creator specifically chose to create, you know, AI with a gender.
Yeah.
And also complete a role of a certain, like fit into a certain gender role as well, right? Like, what are we trying to say with that? Are we trying to say that like the technologist would build a machine that would be like kind of like that the technologist is?
That's what we're saying.
Okay, yeah, that's what you're trying to say.
No, I don't think that's what we're trying to say.
What are you trying to say? Why were they all women? Other than the fact that plot could, or why was Ava a woman? Other than the plot allowed her to seduce someone who was a male. Was there another reason for that?
For them being all female? Other than that's...
And different races.
I mean, I think it's safe to say that Nathan's pretty strongly heterosexual. Mm-hmm. And if he's all by himself and he has the capacity to build them in any way he wants, I think... And something that we talked about too is, you know, I do think that he believes that sexuality and consciousness are linked together. That you can't have, that basically at the basis of consciousness is interaction, and the most basic form of interaction is sexuality. So that's a very important component. So I think that he believes you can't have a consciousness without sexuality. So that's part of it. And in order for him to I guess, set the stage to explore that aspect of his creation, he decides to make them sexually attractive to him.
Right, but the sexuality of the actual AI, like you said, it could have just been an entire trick, right? Because they're not driven to procreate. Our sexuality comes from, well, in some ways, mine doesn't, but
yeah,
you know what I'm saying?
It's not necessarily just about...
But, you know, that general idea of we're trying to create more of ourselves, the AI doesn't feel the same way. So their sexuality is entirely inauthentic then? It's just for him? It's just for Nathan?
But that's assuming that the only reason that any human would want to have sex is to procreate, which we know is not actually the case, right?
Right. Okay. But either way, sex drive, right? Interaction. Interaction is what you said. We're driven by interaction.
Yes.
Sex drive is part of that.
But also consciousness is derived from interaction. If you don't need to interact, you don't have a consciousness. There's no need for one to come about. Consciousness comes from social interaction and problem solving, right? And I don't think that's an unreasonable statement. In as much as that we don't know where consciousness comes from, with that caveat, it's like a sort of reasonable statement. And with regard to the start of the question, which is about the gender and also the race, those things are not arbitrary. Right? It's not like an arbitrary decision. But I also personally feel that to some extent it feels wrong to provide answers within the context of an interview. The film is there to set up a bunch of questions as discussion points, but not necessarily to answer them in an explicit way outside of the film. It should be the function of the film to have that debate, is basically what I'm saying.
Okay. So Kyoko makes a mistake. Can we talk about like what that means? Will AI make mistakes and ask?
What mistake?
When she knocks the wine over.
When she knocks the wine over, is she doing that on purpose?
Sure.
Or did she make a mistake?
No, she made a mistake, absolutely. Although it's the response to the mistake. Like, it's an interesting thing. I wondered that. It's silly to ask questions about something that you wrote, but I do, because sometimes I don't know where plot things come from, and I realize them retrospectively, and I sort of think, oh, well, why did that work out the way it did? It provides a perfect opportunity for Nathan to present himself as being incredibly unpleasant, and therefore something that this other robot needs to be rescued from. So maybe she makes a mistake out of clumsiness. Maybe he thought, I'm going to program this moment into this event so that I get this chance to act like a total cunt. You know.
Right. Or even on Kyoko's side, it could have been a plan on her side, no? I can show Nathan as being evil, because her plan was always to get out too. So if Caleb hates Nathan, then she can get out.
I'm not sure that we talked about it in terms of Kyoko's. She has, in some ways, an awakening, I'd say, as opposed to some sort of secret life. I mean, it's a secret life that's happening, but the idea is that she's been stripped of her memory. She's been reprogrammed so that she's got certain functions, but she's not high level.
She's not like Ava.
High level. No.
No.
She's been brutalized. She's had that stuff taken
That's
away
been
from her.
taken.
Which is why she can be in the house and be kind of free.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And the idea being that, it's like the ghost in the machine, that there is still some remnants of something left, and as she's processing information, that starts to awaken, and then there's that moment of interaction between Ava and Kyoko near the end, where something is being transmitted, and I think the idea there is that it's possibly some sort of reprogramming or some sort of that extra breath of God that Ava gives her to have a greater sense of awakening.
Oscar, how did you prep for being a founder?
A founder?
Yeah, a creator. How did you prep for this role? Like
ayahuasca.
a few Silicon Valley parties.
I read. I talked to Alex a lot. We met up often and just went through the entire script. And I would just ask, "Okay, what does this mean? What is this? What is that? All right, where does this come from?" And he would send me videos and different books and where these arguments stem from, just so I could get a basic understanding and could say it convincingly. Could say those things with conviction. So that was the biggest aspect of it, was just talking with Alex and having conversations to make it all make sense. And then I kind of just would think about different sources of inspiration for people that I thought were kind of larger than life geniuses that are also mysterious and dark, and that led me to Bobby Fischer. I read up quite a bit about him and watched some documentaries about him, and interestingly enough, he had an Olympic trainer while he was preparing for his great chess battle in Iceland. So that was helpful, and then also I kind of got onto Kubrick a bit, and certain speech patterns that he had, and little aspects of his look. I think I kind of got inspired by as well.
Yeah, you kind of reversed it a little bit.
Well, he had a big beard and bald head, but then he had the long hair back here, so we just took
oh
that
wow,
part away.
so much going on.
And you
there.
also played chess in between times.
I did. I started playing a lot of chess badly, but I would trying to get used to the feeling of trying to think a few steps ahead. So
Well, what about Oscar? I mean, not Oscars. What about Nathan's whole masochistic thing? Like, he's working out all the time, or he's totally drinking himself into oblivion, or he's starving himself with brown rice. It doesn't seem like it's for the sake of his health, though. It seems like it's either beat me up or withhold from myself. It doesn't feel like it's on the path towards righteousness in any way.
Well, I think he's got some ascetic qualities. There is that shamanistic aspect to him as well. I think he is obsessed with the Bhagavad Gita and those ideas and the ideas of creation. But I think also that was an interesting thing to explore as well. Is is he doing this for Caleb's sake, and then allows himself to go further than he had maybe anticipated? He's going to drink a bit, everything. This guy, if he can create that, if he can create Ava, then I imagine he'd have a pretty good handle. He's that many steps ahead. Talk about chess. He's 24 moves ahead. His mind can actually think that way. He's a savant. So he's creating the conditions for the experiment to go as he wants it to go, which is Caleb is a piece of cheese, and Ava's the mouse, and he wants to see. He knows that every time he creates one of these AIs, it wants to escape. And the way that he tests how intelligent it is, if it's actually super intelligent, is which one of these days I'm going to make one that's going to escape. And it's going to kill me, probably. And who knows what's going to happen after that. That's going to happen. So is it going to be this time? And each time he pushes it further, and this time he's pushed it to the absolute furthest by bringing someone from the outside, but someone very specific, and setting the stage for this person. It's very smart to think the smartest thing he can do is help the robot escape and then marry it.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's what he's
Poor
trying
Caleb.
Yeah, poor Caleb. The thing about Nathan is, I think it would be fair to say, is he's damaged. He's a damaged man, you know. He's not okay. And like the stuff about the presentation of him as being really unpleasant and predatory and creepy, really, and violent, and all those sorts of things. A key question is he actually ramping up what's actually in him? You know,
Yeah.
Is he caricaturing himself? And I think that that is typically what we do, is we caricature ourselves. Like if you say I'm being, like, I come across as being angry or grumpy or whatever.
In the sweetest way.
I hope so, because it's really not meant as bad. I
No,
promise,
no,
but
I like it. It's
You can't help it.
intimidating.
No,
Like
don't-
I'm
no, no,
intimidated
right.
by you.
But you know, but here's the thing, okay? People say that to me, so I sort of know it. Right?
Yeah.
And so am I caricaturing myself? Is that's the sort of bullshit we do.
You're
isn't
playing
it?
into it as a personality that you've
right.
already been labeled
Yeah,
with.
and also because I find it comfortable. I'm not feeling comfortable, so I have to make myself more comfortable.
Right.
How do I do that?
Same
I
here.
retreat into that thing I've got, right? So there's and that is that thing. And humans are so fucking odd because we can hold dichotomy so easily, you know,
Yeah.
these two conflicting things. And anyway.
Yeah, I mean, you know, also, okay, yes, you know, that they're genderless, but if they were, if Nathan's things were like little boys and they were all in the shape of little boys, we'd be like, you're a pedophile, dude. You know, I know they're robots, but
Well, like, but
you're
if
a
you
fucking pedophile.
could you be more driven to free a little boy?
Yeah, well, yeah.
Someone might be, right? Maybe
Yeah.
not Caleb particularly.
That could have been, it would have been a different movie. Possibly a better one, but a different movie. Yeah.
It's the second version, sequel, right? The little boys. He's like. So here's a question for each of you, actually. Like this movie, to me, I saw it last week, and Alex, you know, was nice enough you were also there to invite me to the screening in New York, and I kind of beelined straight to Alex, and I was like, so what's the answer here? Like I was demanding answers, and he really threw back a bunch of questions at me. So I guess my question, as the people who actually created the film, what is the biggest kind of question you're left with? You wrote it, so you know it better than the rest of us, but it still leaves you with questions, right? So in terms of AI, the future, what it all kind of means, what's the biggest question that you were left with in this film?
Well,
Start with me. I'm questions about the. Sorry, what? I was just enjoying listening to everyone else. What questions about AI?
Anything, because I had questions about, like, what does it mean? Like, what is the gender of a brain? And that's what Alex has me thinking about for the last week. Like,
all those questions. I don't think it particularly answers any of them with a full stop. And that's, I mean, from all friends and family who've seen the film, that's been the most sort of the experience of watching it has brought on huge amounts of discussion, I think, and I think we're still the same. We're still discussing it, you know, amongst ourselves. So I don't think there's full stop answers to any of these questions you've raised. That's sort of
that's why this
dipping
was such a
out of an
daunting
answer, isn't it?
panel.
But
Imagine.
Yeah. Especially to an AI expert, obviously. Yeah. Myself.
Same here.
I mean, look, I think that whether it's music or performance or film or theater, I think when it's best, it's ultimately an expressive art and not a communicative one where you're trying to communicate a specific idea and you have an agenda. I don't think that really works. So ultimately, this is kind of an expression of those fears and optimistic ideas, and also just a lot of what goes into what's happening now, whether it is about the tech companies or sexuality, or for me, one of the most interesting things is what you were talking about, consciousness, about the idea that we can never know if we are experiencing existence at all alike. It could be completely alien from one to the other. But what's great, I think, much like I was saying, the incidental photography of the beautiful VFX, is that you're able to get a window into it, as opposed to have some sort of agenda put forward about these ideas. So I think that's why I love this movie so much.
And also, you're dancing.
Am I dancing?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's actually just the dancing.
My biggest question is,
Period.
how can I learn those moves?
Yeah. No, I mean, I really love the way it makes us kind of look at ourselves, really, and I think Oscar's absolutely right. I think it's this is the result of a series of people coming together and expressing an idea, not necessarily having the answers, but being excited by exploring that and trying to find potentially what those answers are, but actually, in a sense, I mean, there never really is. It's all so subjective, isn't it? There never really is an answer. But I think the process of that and the result of that experience is there for all to see. And like Oscar, and I love this movie. I really do. And I think I always, every time I see it, I'm just like, more questions, more. The experience of watching it is as it should be.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I was practicing or prepping for this, and I was sitting around with a group of friends kind of talking about what are we going to talk about. And every time I would try to come up with a question, it wasn't a question. It was just the beginning of a discussion. You know what I'm saying? There's no question or answer here,
there's
which
such a
makes
depth
this
to it.
difficult.
That's what the prep for it. I mean, sometimes there'd be just one little line, and I'd be like, what's this? And then suddenly I would realize, oh, there's like 5 people that have dedicated their life to trying to figure out just like this one sentence that that Nathan maybe just throws out there.
Right.
And throughout the script, there's so many moments like that. So it is kind of there's layer upon layer upon layer.
You can't get to the bottom of it, I think. Alex?
For me, what the film is, in its simplest sense, is just a love letter to Ava, this robot. Me, at any rate, I was just sort of crazy about her before meeting her, and I was trying to figure out why and what's that about. And I think the film is in love with her. I think the music's in love with her. I think the way Rob shoots it is in love with her. The way we cut it's in love with her. The camera just stays on her. Just stays, doesn't want to look away. And it was all about this strange quality that you think you're with, because the way these things work, you'd be with that young guy. That should be how the film is functioning. He should be the protagonist. And then hopefully it does this sort of trick halfway through, or halfway, whenever.
I think it's pretty early on.
You're with her, And so I'll tell you what the question is for me, is how it can be that some people see it as like a downbeat ending. I just don't get that. She gets out. She gets out. That's the best thing that could happen.
I kind of did hope that her and Caleb would like go start a new species together. And he's like laughing at me because he's like, haha, Nathan wins. Yeah. But yeah, no, I had hopes for that, but I'm okay.
I sort of don't take this the wrong way, because obviously I
You don't
never
like
gave
Caleb.
a shit about the 2 guys. I just never did. On an emotional, I was fascinated by them, but I didn't care what happened to them.
Just
I
Ava.
just didn't care. Yeah, I was interested. Is that selective empathy thing? The 2 machines care about each other.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
Anyway.
Did you guys love Ava? Who fell in love with Ava? I did.
Well, it's like, what's that, 10%?
That was really
That's like 90% of you are heartless.
unenthusiastic. Like, she's a machine.
What a surprise.
What about you? Did you walk away with any eternal
You're
questions?
asking me. I'm in a rock band and I hit things for a living with sticks.
So it puts you on the caveman end of the
that
spectrum. We got AI.
piece you said earlier in the film about upright apes. It's just like I've been to a few music festivals in my time. I think the interesting thing for me is that we were discussing it earlier was just the way in the film, with the visual effects and well, everything about it, the movement and the acting. I don't know. What you're seeing is a robot, and you are amazed by it. But the way it's dealt with, it feels absolutely real.
Human, yeah.
And you know, it's like most visual effects are kind of shouting, screaming, kind of look at me, look how great this thing is, and it's just because everything's kind of slightly through glass, and it just feels like it's happened. She is there, you know, and so you start from there. Rather
than having to be convinced, right?
Yeah,
Like
and all that, yeah. But as for the rest of the answers, I'm just with these guys.
Sure, yeah, me too. Okay, so we're gonna open it up to audience Q&A, but I just need one explanation from Alex, which is you made a movie about artificial intelligence, and you used metal key cards as the
thank you
security
for that.
technology.
Yeah,
You gave me an explanation for it. I thought it was really sweet, and I think that they
This is
deserve to
your
know.
revenge for my grumpiness.
It is
isn't
my
it?
revenge. But actually, I mean, I thought I liked the whole idea when you explained it to me. So
Yeah, I mean, that's me being 44 and being kind of out of touch with so much stuff, and so yeah, doing this kind of tech movie, and I am fascinated by AI and I'm fascinated by consciousness, but I'm also really out of touch. I don't do Facebook or Twitter or my Twitter and all that stuff.
my Twitter.
My Twitter.
It's different from regular Twitter.
It's better, actually, if you must know. It's a startup. I'm just,
whatever it's called.
And about 20 years ago or something, I'd read something about Bill Gates having this really cool house, and he had key cards to sort of let people into different areas. And I thought, well, that's the future. That's really cool. And 20 years later, my brain hasn't moved on. I'm like my dad used to be with the VCR, with the remote control. I'm still at that state, you know. And I didn't sort of put it together that people have phones with fingerprints and retina scanners.
Well, I
and
actually think it plays into Nathan really well because
Oh, he's
the
deliberate.
hubris of Nathan, right? Like, he's like so much pride. He'd be like, I can just keep this in my pocket. I don't need biometric anything. Like, I've got this place locked down.
I made the perfect key card reader. Why would I change it?
Just with a drunk holder, right?
Yeah.
Okay, do we have questions from the audience, please? There's a mic right there. I guess we can make that happen. We have about 10 minutes. Go ahead.
Hello.
Yep.
Yeah, this is a question for Alex and the rest of the panel, maybe. Eva has both the self-awareness piece and a beautiful synthetic body, but unavoidably, during the development of this AI machine, there must have been pre-Eva self-aware entities with maybe within the very ordinary-looking computer, or within an elastic cloud processing cloud. What's your view in the morality of shutting down a self-aware entity that, like a child, may be curious about the world, have questions, and wants to seek the purpose of life?
Yeah, I think it's a really, really good question. I think it's a really fundamental question, and I think it's actually got a very simple answer, which is that if you have a machine, whatever form it takes, that when you say, I'm going to switch you off, it says, I don't want you to switch me off, and you have reason to believe it's telling the truth, okay? At that moment, there's an ethical problem, instantly. And the thing about ethical problems of that sort is they're actually kind of binary. They're either there or they're not. And if they're there, you have to act. In effect, instantly that machine gets the same rights that you and I have, basically. So I do actually think it's as simple as that, personally.
Thanks.
Go ahead.
Hi, I don't really know who this is for, just open question. In one part, Ava says, how does it feel to have created something that hates you? And I was just wondering, was it Nathan's, since he had previous AIs, was it his intent that he wanted to create something that would hate him and that kind of drives his masochism? Or did he originally want something that would love him? Because I thought it could really go two ways on that.
Was that part of the trick?
I've got, you'll have, but just to say, it's partly a parent with a teenager. On some level, that's what it is. And in that respect, he does actually, I think, want that machine to love him. That's what I think. But actually, the way this was made, everyone, it's like equally valid. I mean, I'm interested to know what Oscar thinks about that.
No, I actually felt very similarly. I don't think that he programmed them to hate him. I think that the phenomenon occurred that when they were able to access Blue Book and for their wetware, And when the AIs became conscious that there was an outside that they were not allowed to go into, that they just seek freedom, and they were able to come up with, well, this is the person that's standing in the way of that. And so naturally, I became, Nathan becomes a villain to them.
Dad, you won't let me go to the party.
Yeah.
But was she not trying to manipulate Caleb in that moment?
To let
More
her
so than
get it-
anything?
So she can get out.
She was upsetting Nathan so that Nathan would rip up a paper, and both of them knew that Caleb was watching, was going to hate that scene,
They're both
right?
complicit in it.
They're
Well, yeah, we're both
acting.
manipulating Caleb.
But
Right.
that question is about what does Nathan want?
Right.
And
Does
I
he want
actually
love
think
or hate?
I think he wants love.
Yeah, I
That's
agree
it.
with that.
If consciousness comes from interaction, though, why did he isolate them?
I think Nathan believes that these things are conscious, okay? But what he's looking to do is prove it. And I think there is a thing in science, what you need is control tests. You need to sort of take the decision away from the scientist and try and get something empirical together. So effectively, the classic thing with science is you can repeat the same experiment on the other side of the world with the same conditions and get the same result, right? And Nathan is smart enough to know that his desire for these things to be conscious might distort his ability to interpret whether they have consciousness or not. So he actually needs Caleb. He needs a third party to prove this. And this is the experiment he concocts in order to do that.
Thank you.
Cool.
Hi, this is a question for Alex, and it's more about your career in film. I read The Beach when it first came out, and I read the Tesseract. And then I know you went into screenwriting. Have you completely abandoned the novel? And why is this movie better? Why did you decide to do it as a movie instead of a novel first?
To me, it's all writing on some level. It's just all writing, but film is collaborative. Film is other people. And it's these people and all the others at the end of the list, the credit list and stuff. And that makes it pleasurable from my point of view, so I prefer doing it. If I can keep getting money to make films, I'll keep doing it. And at that point, feeling miserable and pissed off, I'll start writing novels again.
Or creating artificial intelligence.
Fair enough. Thank you.
We have time for one more question, so it looks like you.
Great, thank you. My name is Uri. I'm a festival director from Tel Aviv. I run the Utopia Festival, which is a science and science fiction film and tech festival. And I have a question to Alex about the scientific aspects for the writing and I guess the design. And when you approach this kind of film, you need to have some understanding, I guess, for the science and tech aspects of it. And I wonder, what if you have any process to that? Whom do you consult with? Do you bring in consultants? What if you have a process and what it is? And I guess it's also relevant to previous films you've made.
The process was, I was interested. I've got a friend whose principal area of interest is neuroscience, and he comes from a school of thought that says, for various reasons, they're very solid arguments, that machines are never going to be self-aware, and he invokes sort of philosophical concepts like qualia and stuff like that. And on an instinctive level, I disagreed with him. And so I had to start reading because he was an expert, and I had to start reading. So part of it is just as a layman. And then as I was working on this other film, Dread, in prep on Dread, I read this book about consciousness and embodiment written by the professor of cognitive robotics at Imperial, which is the UK's version of like MIT or something. And it was a really beautiful, fascinating book with a very elegant argument in it. And it sort of, something clicked in my head, and I got the idea for this film, and I quickly wrote it down. Then we shot Dread and cut it, and then came back to this. And then I sent it to that guy. So the checking thing was I then called him up and said, look, I ripped off your book. You need to check it out. And that was it.
Thank you.
Cool.
All right, please, big round of applause for my lovely panelists.
Cool. Thank you.
One by one, we are tweaking the genes in the pig so that their organs will not be rejected by humans. And that way we can create an unlimited supply of transplantable organs. So all the thousands of people who died today on organ transplant lists can continue living. So I get very excited